They called her the Platinum Blonde. She was the woman who made the world blush and Hollywood rich. But behind the laughter, behind the diamonds and the peroxide glow, Jean Harlow was dying slowly, silently, and long before anyone noticed. In the early 1930 seconds, no one shone brighter. She was the fantasy of the Depression era, the girl who smiled while the world collapsed. Her skin was luminous, her hair a halo of light, and her screen presence electric. Men desired her. Women tried to become her. But the real Jean Harlow was nothing like the woman they saw on screen. Off camera, she was fragile, a young woman trapped in a studio system that fed her stardom and starved her soul. MGM controlled everything: her image, her weight, her voice, even her love life. They bleached her hair until her scalp burned, painted her into perfection, and demanded she never let the mask slip. They sold her as the woman who could make men weak. But in truth, it was Hollywood that broke her. Her marriage ended in tragedy. Her health collapsed under studio pressure. And when she begged for rest, the executives told her to keep smiling. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Jean Harlow was only 26, too young to die, too famous to be saved. Everyone saw the glow. No one saw the fire underneath. She was the first blonde bombshell, and the first to pay the price for it. Before the fame, before the lights, before Hollywood turned her into a myth, she was just Harlean Carpenter, a shy girl from Kansas City who dreamed of nothing more than a quiet, ordinary life. Born in 1911, Harlean grew up under the rule of her mother, Jean Bello, a woman with ambitions larger than the Midwest sky. Bello had once dreamed of being an actress herself, but had been forced into domestic life. When she realized her daughter possessed the kind of beauty that could bend the world, she decided to live her dream through her. Harlean's childhood was not cruel, but it was controlled. Her mother's affection was overwhelming, suffocating even. She dressed Harlean like a doll, pushed her toward attention, and taught her that admiration was a form of love. The message was clear: be adored or be nothing. When her parents divorced, Harlean's mother took her to Los Angeles, not to start a new life, but to chase the one she'd always wanted. It was the 1920 seconds, the golden dawn of motion pictures, when studios were hungry for faces that could fill silent screens with emotion. Harlean didn't want it, but Hollywood did. A chance encounter changed everything. While driving a friend to a casting call, Harlean was spotted by a Fox executive who asked if she'd consider appearing on screen. She laughed. She didn't even plan to audition. But within a year, her name, or rather, the name her mother insisted she take, began to appear in movie credits: Jean Harlow. At just 18, she was thrust into a world that worshipped beauty and devoured innocence. She had no training, no plan, and no protection, only a mother who wanted her to be famous, and a studio system that knew exactly how to make that happen. They dyed her hair to platinum, a shade so bright it seemed unreal under the lights. They painted her lips red, her eyebrows thin, her image untouchable. Audiences had never seen anything like her. She was innocence wrapped in sin, a paradox that defined an era desperate for escape. Her breakout came in Howard Hughes's Hell's Angels, 1930, a film that introduced sound and sexuality in the same breath. Hughes saw in her something Hollywood hadn't yet dared to show: a woman who could be both childlike and carnal, naive and knowing, pure and dangerous. She was magic on film, and she didn't even understand why. But success came fast, too fast. By 1931, she was the face of MGM's new dream factory, the studio's miracle blonde. But behind the lights, Jean Harlow was already crumbling. Her mother controlled her money. Her first marriage, to a wealthy producer, ended when he shot himself in the same house they shared. And though MGM promised to protect her image, they protected their profits instead. She became a product, the perfect blonde, whose pain was hidden behind laughter. Every close-up, every headline, every fan letter was another layer of illusion. Jean Harlow was no longer a person, she was a projection, a symbol of everything America wanted and everything it feared. By 1933, Jean Harlow was no longer just a star, she was a phenomenon. Her image gleamed on billboards, cigarette cards, and magazine covers from Los Angeles to London. She wasn't just famous, she was the embodiment of desire itself. The press called her the Platinum Blonde, the woman who made sex appeal a household phrase. In a world still reeling from the Great Depression, she became the fantasy that made struggle feel glamorous. When Jean walked onto a set, every man fell silent. Every woman watched her with envy and fascination. But beneath that glow, she was exhausted physically, emotionally, spiritually. MGM's publicity machine turned her into the ideal modern woman, witty, sexual, confident, untouchable. But the real Jean was gentle, self-deprecating, and painfully unsure of herself. She would apologize to crew members, laugh too loud at jokes, and often retreat to her dressing room to cry in private. The system didn't allow for fragility, it demanded perfection. The platinum hair that made her famous was maintained with a brutal mixture of ammonia, Clorox, and Lux soap flakes, a chemical cocktail that burned her scalp and made her hair fall out in clumps. The constant lights, the lack of sleep, the endless production schedules, all of it eroded her health. But MGM kept her working. The blonde bombshell was their golden ticket, and the show couldn't stop. Her private life was even more turbulent. After her first husband's suicide, she became guarded a woman, surrounded by admirers but untouched by real intimacy. That changed when she met William Powell, the suave leading man known for his intelligence and sophistication. Powell was older, steady, and kind. For the first time, Jean felt safe. Friends said he treated her with genuine affection, something no one else in Hollywood had done. But even love couldn't save her from the weight of her own myth. In public, she was the blonde who made men weak. In private, she was the daughter of a controlling mother who still signed her checks, read her letters, and decided who she could see. When Jean and Powell spoke of marriage, her mother forbade it. She didn't want to lose control, not of her daughter, and certainly not of her fortune. Then came the sickness. During the filming of Saratoga 1937, Jean began to feel constant fatigue. Her face puffed, her skin turned pale, her breath came short. The studio doctors brushed it off as exhaustion. They gave her tonics, rest days, a new diet, anything but the truth. But her kidneys were failing. By June 1937, she was too weak to stand. On set, Clark Gable carried her between takes, whispering encouragement. She tried to laugh it off, she always did, but her body was collapsing. When she was finally taken to the hospital, it was too late. Her mother, still clinging to denial and superstition, refused proper medical care for days. By the time doctors intervened, Jean was delirious. Her last words, whispered to a nurse, were haunting in their simplicity. "Mother, I feel so tired." She died on the 7th of June 1937, at just 26 years old. MGM ordered silence. They rushed to finish Saratoga using a stand-in and told the press it was a sudden illness, no details, no accountability. The studio machine that had created Jean Harlow could not afford to show what it had destroyed. In the golden haze of old Hollywood, Jean Harlow's death became just another story, tragic, glamorous, and sanitized for headlines. But behind the studio's official statement of sudden illness lay one of the most haunting examples of how the system chewed through its brightest stars. Jean didn't die from mystery. She died from neglect and from the control of those who loved her most. Her mother, Jean Bello, refused to believe her daughter was truly sick. A devoted follower of Christian Science, she rejected doctors and hospitals, convinced that faith alone could heal. When Jean's condition worsened, Bello locked the door and forbade medical help. Studio executives begged to intervene not out of compassion, but out of panic. Jean was their biggest star. Her illness was a financial disaster. For days, the young actress drifted in and out of consciousness in her bedroom, calling for help that never came. By the time she was finally taken to Good Samaritan Hospital, her kidneys had already begun to fail completely. She was swollen, delirious, gasping for air. And yet, even then, MGM demanded discretion. They arranged private doctors, controlled the narrative, and instructed the press to report that she was resting comfortably. The truth that the world's most famous blonde was dying in agony at 26 was too damaging to print. William Powell rushed to her bedside, desperate to see her, but her mother refused him entry. The woman who had shaped Jean's life to fit her own dreams also controlled her final moments. And in those moments, Jean's final words were not cinematic. They were small, exhausted, and human. "Mother, I feel so tired." When she died, the studio's response was immediate and chillingly efficient. They replaced her in films, reshot scenes, and even released her last movie, Saratoga, completed with a double and old footage so audiences could still see her smile even after she was gone. They turned her death into another show. The press turned her into a myth, the blonde who burned too bright. They didn't write about her mother's control, or MGM's manipulation, or how a 26-year-old woman had begged for rest and been denied it. To the world, Jean Harlow was a comet, dazzling, untouchable, gone too soon. But those who knew her saw the truth. She wasn't a goddess. She was a child who never got to grow up, a victim of a system that sold fantasy at any cost, a daughter who died trying to make her mother proud, and an actress whose light was dimmed by the very machine she helped build. Even now, her story feels like a warning whispered through time, that behind every perfect face in Hollywood lies a contract written in pain. Jean Harlow didn't just die young, she was used up. From this channel's perspective, Jean Harlow's life is one of Hollywood's most haunting cautionary tales, a story not about fame, but about the cost of being adored. She was the first true creation of the studio system, a human being sculpted into an ideal that no one, not even she, could sustain. Everything about Jean was manufactured. Her hair, her voice, her name, her smile. MGM didn't just build her image, they owned it. They turned Harley Carpenter, the shy girl from Kansas City, into Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde, an icon of seduction, humor, and confidence. But behind every poster and film reel, there was a frightened young woman with no control over her own life. Hollywood taught her that vulnerability was weakness, that to be desirable, she had to be obedient, that to stay loved, she had to stay perfect. It's easy to remember her as a legend, but her real story is a quiet tragedy of exploitation. Her studio demanded she smile through exhaustion. Her mother demanded she worship success over sanity. The men around her demanded she be the fantasy they projected on her. In the end, everyone took from her her beauty, her health, her time, and gave nothing back but applause. Jean Harlow's death was not an accident. It was an inevitability, the result of a system built on control and denial. A system that told women like her that being beautiful was their power, and being human was their flaw. And that's why her story still resonates today. Because for every Jean Harlow, there are countless other stars who shine until the world decides it's had enough light. When we watch her movies now, Red Dust, Dinner at 8, Bombshell, it's hard not to feel the ache beneath the laughter. You can almost see the exhaustion in her eyes, the loneliness hiding behind her comedic timing. She was playing herself a woman pretending to be fine. Jean Harlow's tragedy is not that she died young, it's that she never got to live as herself. Hollywood immortalized her as the platinum blonde, but that wasn't who she was. She was Harleyan, and the world never knew her. In the end, she became what Hollywood always wanted, a legend, not a person. Today, when we watch her on screen laughing in satin gowns, her hair shimmering like moonlight, Jean Harlow still feels alive. There's a spark in her eyes, a mischief in her voice, something too real to fade, even after nearly a century. But that's the paradox of legends. They die, yet they never really disappear. Hollywood has buried many of its ghosts, but Jean remains one of its brightest. She wasn't the first woman to be controlled by fame, and she won't be the last, but she was the first to show the world what it looks like when light becomes a weapon. In the 1,930 seconds, she was everything the world desired, modern, fearless, radiant. Yet behind the illusion of glamour was a young woman who never had the chance to grow old, to rest, or to live her own story. Her death shocked Hollywood, but her image lived on. Directors copied her look. Actresses imitated her style. Marilyn Monroe herself called Jean her idol, the blueprint of the blonde bombshell. Every woman who came after her walked in her shadow, borrowing pieces of her glow. But the truth is, Jean never wanted to be immortal. She just wanted to be free. The camera gave her eternity, but it also stole her peace. And maybe that's the most tragic part of all, that in becoming an icon, she lost the chance to simply be a woman. Her laughter still echoes through celluloid reels, a reminder of the cost of beauty and the cruelty of brilliance. Jean Harlow didn't fade away, she burned out, fast and blinding, leaving the world to wonder how something so luminous could also be so fragile. She was more than a face, more than a myth. She was a girl who burned too bright in a world that never let her dim. Some stars die, others explode, and light the sky forever. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now, you know,